Hey YouTube, this is Dak and Farmer with TBT Reviews here, and today we're gonna be talking about the album Gasoline by Theory of a Deadman. Now this is Theory of a Deadman's sophomore release, released on March 29th of 2005, and I guess with that, let's get right into the track reviews. Now, for the first track on the album, we have Hating Hollywood, and this song, while it is a nice opener, to me it's plagued with average lyrics and just terribly monotonous and generic riffing that really tends to bog this opener down and doesn't give it much promise. So I'm going to have to give this track a 6.5 out of 10. Next up, second track on the album, we have No Way Out. And this one's a bit more upbeat, this one's a bit heavier, this one has nicer lyrics, and overall just a catchier chorus. This song is going to get an 8 out of 10. Much better than the first track. And third up, we have No Surprise, which is the third track and first single released off of Gasoline. No Surprise opens with a nice acoustic chording intro and some vocals, some clean melodic vocals from Tyler Connolly. And this track, unsurprisingly, went to number 1 on the Billboard charts, and this was the band's first number 1 hit single. Congratulations to them for that. But this track overall was pretty nice, and I'm going to have to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Fourth track on the album, we have Quiver. Quiver starts off with a pretty, just a bit of a strange opening acoustic riff, which is then transcribed a few seconds later onto the electric guitar, and we're left with just some average music and even subpar lyrical writing on this track. Unfortunately, this one's going to have to get a 6 out of 10. That's not that good. The fifth track off the album, however, tends to bring, kind of the average to good track list a little bit more upwards in the upward trajectory. Fifth track, we have Santa Monica. Now, this track is arguably the band's most recognizable and arguably their trademark song. Very beautifully written. It's acoustic for the most part. We have our first 3/4 of the song in acoustic with vocals, drums, bass, all that lighter stuff in there. And in the final chorus, we have a very nicely integrated acoustic and electric plucking in the background, which does the song favor, I think. It's a very nice way to bring it all together at the end. And this track has been pretty legendary for the band. It's one of their better tracks, for sure. And so, while to me it doesn't quite measure up to Make Up Your Mind, this is just opinion-based. This is, just the way I think. I don't think it quite measures up, but it's a very close second. So I'm going to have to give Santa Monica a 9.5 out of 10. It's an almost perfect score, so props to that. Next track off the album, we have Better Off. Better Off was released as another single off of this album, and it's got a bit of a harder edge to it. It's got some pretty edgy lyrics, and it's a nice heavy hard rock tune that got some radio play as a kid, when I was a kid, and that's what got me into this track. And it's a very interesting one, and I think it's got a bit of integrity to it, so I'm going to have to give that track an 8 out of 10. Next up, we have Say Goodbye. Now, this is where, to me, most of the album starts to dip a little bit. We're getting towards the middle tracks, and usually we're seeing a bit of a slump there, and that is no different in the case of Gasoline's middle tracks. Say Goodbye is a somewhat poorly written, mostly acoustic, it's not a very catchy chorus, slightly below average lyrical writing, slightly below average musicianship. I'm going to have to give this track a 5 out of 10. Next track, we have Hello Lonely, Walk Away From This. And this is another track following Say Goodbye that continues this idea of a light acoustic song that just, it doesn't really work for the song. The lyrics aren't good. The vocals are okay. The musicianship is average. The song is average overall. It's a 5 out of 10. Next up, we have the track Me and My Girl. It starts out with a bit of a banjo-y western kind of vibe to it, and then it kicks in. You get a heavy electric guitar coming in about 15 seconds into the song. That kind of saves it a little bit, because after that intro, I was pretty scared the first time I heard this. I had my phone on shuffle. That was a couple years back, and this song came on. I'm like, well, what in the hell is a banjo doing in a Theory of a Deadman song? For a second, I thought it was something by the what's the band name there? Charlie Daniels Band or something like that. That's kind of the vibe I was getting instantly, and I was a little turned off. But once the electric guitar came in, kind of saved the song. Lyrics were pretty good in this one, but your generic Theory of a Deadman love song type deal where, oh, she's a bitch, oh, I can't handle her, get her out of my life. And so due to that, we're going to have to give this track a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have the song called Since You've Been Gone. Now, this one is where the album starts to pick back up a little bit again after its little middle slump. Kind of started to get me a bit discouraged about how I was going to feel about the entire disc. And Since You've Been Gone, once again, employs the same kind of mechanic that Say Goodbye and Hello Lonely did, only it did it a bit better. It was an acoustic track, and I think it was very nicely written, got some very soulful, very nice melodic vocals coming from Tyler Connolly, and pretty generic chords in the background to back it up, but it's beautiful and soulful, and it has this atmosphere that some of the other lighter tracks on the album didn't have. And so for that, I'm going to have to give this track a 7 out of 10. Next up, we have what could very well be, just in my opinion, the most ridiculous, unneeded filler track in Theory of a Deadman's entire discography. Hell Just Ain't the Same. This track barely floats over the minute mark, and it's just useless. It's some dude, it's just Tyler Connolly singing over some acoustic riffing, and it's just him playing his guitar and singing in this one. We don't get to hear the rest of the band and what they, would regularly perform on these songs. And it's just, it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't have much musical integrity to it. The lyrics are so simple and plain. I don't know what they were thinking with this one. This track is just not good and is complete filler. So for that, I'm going to have to give it a 2.5 out of 10. Whew, that track scared me a little bit. Thank goodness it wasn't more than a minute long, or I would have been pretty pissed off with these guys. I thought that last track was a joke. But as the title would imply, save the best for last. This is one of the last tracks on the disc, and it's actually one of the better ones, too. It's one of the best ones, ironically. This track is different for Theory of a Deadman. As for this one, they use the drop A tuning, and they actually employ the usage of a 7-string guitar. The riffing in this song overall, it's pretty decent. The lyrics are great. The chorus is arguably one of the catchiest these guys have ever written, and it seemed to do this album a bit of good towards the end of it. So I'm going to have to give this track a 9 out of 10. To close off the album, we have the lighter, mostly acoustic track In the Middle. And again, as this song would imply, In the Middle, that's kind of where my thoughts are with this one. I thought this track was pretty average. Lyrics aren't that good. The song isn't even that long, and it kind of drags on to me. The musicianship is average. Tyler's vocals kind of sound like they do throughout the rest of the acoustic tracks on the album, except they almost sounded more processed, less. They almost had less integrity to them than we'd usually expect from the guy. And for that, I'd have to give the final track on Gasoline, In the Middle, a 5.5 out of 10. Well, that brings us to the end of this review. I think overall I'd have to give this album a 65. Yeah, 65 out of 100. It's a release that's about as good as their first one, but has a bit more balance to it. It has its good tracks and its bad tracks and its average tracks. And I thought it was a more cohesive release than their first, but I still think their first had, a bit more, it had a bit more memory to it. You're going to remember some of the songs on the first album a little bit more than you are the tracks on the second album. Now, the good tracks on this album shine, and that's what redeems this album overall and saves it from being one of those average releases that we hear about every day in the news, and that ones that we don't really care about. But I'd like to hear what you guys think about this album. So leave it in the comments, and if you liked this video, subscribe. We have more album reviews coming soon, so I'd like you guys to stay tuned. And this is Dak and Farmer from TBT Reviews signing off. Hope you guys have a great day, and hope you enjoyed the review.